My son thought I didn't notice when he put something strange in my backpack. I put it in his car. My name is Gregory, and at 58 years old, I never thought I would be writing about something like this. For most of my life, I was a proud father to my son Alan, who is now 27. Our relationship had become strained over the past few years, but nothing prepared me for what happened last summer. I noticed Alan secretly placing something in my fishing gear box while we were preparing for our weekend trip. Instead of confronting him, I decided to move it to his car. Before I tell you what happened 30 minutes later, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more real-life stories that might just change your perspective on family relationships. After my wife Sarah passed away from breast cancer 15 years ago, my entire world changed. She was the love of my life, my high school sweetheart, and suddenly I was left alone to raise our 12-year-old son. The grief was overwhelming. There were nights I would sit in our bedroom after Alan had gone to sleep holding her picture and wondering how I would possibly manage without her. She had been the one who knew exactly what to say when Alan was upset, the one who could make him laugh even on his worst days. Those first few months were the hardest. I had to learn to be both mother and father while processing my own grief. I would make Alan's lunch for school, often finding myself putting in the same peanut butter sandwich that Sarah used to make, cutting off the crusts just the way she did. At parent-teacher conferences, I would sit alone in chairs meant for two parents, feeling her absence like a physical pain. Despite the challenges, Alan and I formed a special bond in those early years. I was determined not to let my grief interfere with raising him well. I cut back on my hours at the construction company where I worked as a project manager, arranging to be home when Alan returned from school. My boss was understanding. He had known Sarah too. Weekends became our special time together. We would go fishing at Baker Lake, just 2 hours from our home in Washington State. I taught Alan how to bait a hook, how to wait patiently for the fish to bite, and how to reel in his catch without losing it. His first catch was a small rainbow trout that barely met the size requirement to keep. But to see the pride in his eyes when he held up that fish, it was worth every early morning wake-up. We also went camping regularly in the summer months. I would teach Alan how to set up a tent, how to build a safe campfire, and how to identify the constellations in the night sky. Those moments under the stars, roasting marshmallows and telling stories, were when Alan would sometimes open up about missing his mom. I would hold him close and tell him stories about her, how she loved to dance in the kitchen while cooking, how she could name every bird that visited our backyard feeder, how her laugh could fill a room. My career took a back seat during those years. I turned down 2 promotions that would have required more travel or longer hours. Some of my coworkers couldn't understand why I would sacrifice advancement, but to me, it wasn't a sacrifice at all. Being there for Alan was the only thing that mattered. Everything changed when Alan entered his teenage years. The sweet, thoughtful boy who loved fishing with his dad began to disappear, replaced by a sullen teenager who slammed doors and answered questions with grunts. At first, I thought it was normal teenage behavior. I remembered my own rebellious phase. But it soon became clear that Alan's issues went deeper. He started hanging around with a new group of friends from school, kids I didn't know and rarely met. His grades began to slip. He would come home late, smelling of cigarettes and sometimes alcohol. When I tried to talk to him about it, he would shut down or lash out. "You don't understand anything," became his favorite phrase, usually shouted from behind his bedroom door. I tried different approaches. I attempted to be the understanding dad, offering to listen without judgment. When that didn't work, I tried being strict, setting curfews, grounding him when he broke rules, taking away his phone privileges. Nothing seemed to work. The more I tried to control the situation, the more Alan pulled away. By his junior year of high school, Alan was skipping classes regularly. I received calls from the school counselor expressing concerns, not just about his attendance, but about possible substance abuse. One night, I found empty beer cans hidden in his closet, along with a small bag of marijuana. When confronted, Alan didn't even try to deny it. "Everyone does it, Dad," he said with a shrug that broke my heart. "It's not a big deal." But it became a big deal when he was caught drinking on school property and suspended for a week. I took time off work to stay home with him, trying desperately to reach the son I felt I was losing. We had long talks that sometimes ended in shouting matches and sometimes in uncomfortable silence. I suggested counseling, both family and individual, but Alan refused. Despite everything, Alan managed to graduate high school, though his grades had suffered significantly. I was proud of him for making it through and hopeful that college would give him a fresh start. He was accepted to Washington State University, not his first choice, but a good school nonetheless. I helped him move into his dorm, arranged his financial aid, and bought him new bedding and supplies. As I drove away that day, leaving him on campus, I prayed that this would be the turning point. It wasn't. Alan dropped out during his second semester, calling me late one night to say he wasn't learning anything useful, and that college was a waste of time and money. He moved back home temporarily, then found an apartment with some friends in Seattle. I helped with the security deposit, hoping that independence might foster responsibility. For a while, Alan worked various jobs, at a coffee shop, a bookstore, delivering food. None lasted more than a few months. He would either quit because of some perceived slight from a manager or be let go for tardiness or unreliability. Each time he would call asking for money to make rent or buy groceries, and each time, despite my better judgment, I would help him out. Our phone calls became less frequent. He would go weeks without responding to my messages, then suddenly call needing something. When we did talk, the conversations were surface level. He never shared details about his life, his friends, or what he was doing day to day. I knew better than to pry too much, afraid that asking too many questions would push him further away. By the time Alan turned 27, we were practically strangers who happened to share the same DNA. He would visit maybe once every few months, usually when he needed money. I still lived in the same house where he had grown up, his bedroom preserved much as he had left it. Sometimes when he visited, I would catch him looking at old family photos or thumbing through books from his childhood, and for a brief moment, I would see a glimmer of the boy I had raised. But then the moment would pass, the wall would come back up, and he would be gone again, taking a piece of my heart with him each time. I never gave up hope that someday, somehow, my son would find his way back to me, that we could rebuild what we had lost. Little did I know that a fateful weekend in June would change everything, just not in the way I had imagined. The phone call came on a Wednesday evening in early June. I was in the backyard tending to the vegetable garden Sarah had started all those years ago. I still grew her favorite tomatoes and zucchini every summer, a small way of keeping her memory alive. When I saw Alan's name on my phone screen, I felt the familiar mixture of hope and anxiety that always accompanied his calls. We hadn't spoken in nearly 3 months, not since his birthday in March, when I had mailed him a card with $200 tucked inside. He had texted a brief thanks, but nothing more. "Alan," I answered, trying to keep my voice casual. "How are you, son?" "Hey, Dad." His voice sounded different, tense with an edge I couldn't quite place. "I was thinking I might come by this weekend, maybe Friday." I nearly dropped the trowel I was holding. Alan never voluntarily came to visit, especially not with advance notice. "Of course," I said quickly before he could change his mind. "That would be great. I'd love to see you." "Yeah, okay. I'll be there around noon on Friday. Gotta go now." Before I could say anything else, the line went dead. I stood in the garden, phone in hand, puzzled by the brevity of the call, but grateful for it nonetheless. Maybe this was the turning point I had been waiting for. Maybe Alan was finally ready to rebuild our relationship. I spent Thursday cleaning the house from top to bottom, even though it was already fairly tidy. I washed the sheets on Alan's bed, dusted the shelves in his old room, and made sure the bathroom was spotless. I went to the grocery store and bought all his favorite foods, the ingredients for spaghetti bolognese, the brand of potato chips he liked, and chocolate chip ice cream for dessert. I even picked up a 6-pack of the craft beer he had mentioned liking the last time we spoke. Friday morning, I was up early, too nervous to sleep. I prepared the sauce for dinner, letting it simmer slowly the way Sarah had taught me. The rich aroma filled the kitchen, bringing back memories of family dinners from years past. By 11:30, everything was ready. I sat in the living room pretending to read a book while watching the clock and listening for the sound of a car in the driveway. Alan arrived at 12:20, pulling up in an old Honda Civic I hadn't seen before. Through the window, I watched him sit in the car for a few minutes before finally getting out. He looked thinner than the last time I had seen him, his face drawn and pale. He glanced around nervously as he approached the front door, as if expecting someone to be watching. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was how exhausted he looked. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly as he shoved them into his pockets. "Hey, Dad," he said, giving me an awkward half-hug before stepping inside. "It's good to see you, son," I replied, fighting the urge to comment on his appearance. "You hungry? I made spaghetti." "Not really. Maybe later." We moved to the living room, settling into an uncomfortable silence. Alan kept checking his phone, his leg bouncing nervously. I tried to make conversation, asking about his job. He was between positions. His apartment, he had moved again. His friends, he was vague. Each question seemed to increase his agitation. During a lull in our stilted conversation, Alan rolled up his sleeves due to the warm June day. That's when I noticed the bruises on the inside of his left arm, small circular marks that I recognized from my years working with the community outreach program at church. They were injection sites, the telltale signs of someone using intravenous drugs. My heart sank. I had suspected drug use for years, but seeing physical evidence made it painfully real. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, to somehow fix this problem that had clearly spiraled out of control. But years of difficult interactions had taught me that direct confrontation would only push Alan away. So I said nothing, pretending not to notice as he quickly rolled his sleeve back down when he caught me looking. "So," Alan said, suddenly breaking the silence, "I was thinking maybe we could go fishing tomorrow." I nearly choked on my coffee. Alan hadn't willingly gone fishing with me since high school. "Fishing," I repeated, certain I had misheard. "Yeah, at Baker Lake like we used to. Weather's supposed to be good." He wasn't making eye contact, instead focusing intently on his phone. "I'd love that," I said carefully, trying to contain my surprise and hope. "I still have all the gear. We could leave early, make a day of it." "Great," Alan said, a flash of relief crossing his face. "We should check the gear tonight, though, make sure everything's in working order. It's been a while." That request struck me as odd. Alan had never been particularly interested in the technical aspects of fishing, but I agreed, grateful for any opportunity to spend time with my son. As the evening progressed, Alan's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He barely touched the spaghetti I served for dinner, despite it once being his favorite meal. He made frequent trips to the bathroom, each time returning more jittery than before. He asked detailed questions about our fishing plans, what time we would leave, which part of the lake we would visit, how long we would stay, what route we would take. "I thought we'd leave around 6, I said. "Take the North Shore Road. There's less people there this time of year." "And we'd be back when?" Alan pressed. "Mid-afternoon, unless you want to stay longer." "No, mid-afternoon is good. I have things to do later." After dinner, I suggested we check the fishing gear as he had requested. I led him to the garage where I kept my large tackle box and rods. As I began to inspect the reels and lines, I noticed Alan hovering near the tackle box, his attention focused on it rather than on the rods I was checking. "Why don't you look through the tackle box?" I suggested. "Make sure we have enough hooks and weights." Alan nodded too eagerly, immediately kneeling beside the large plastic box. He opened it and began rummaging through the compartments. But his movement seemed less about inspection and more about familiarization, as if he was memorizing the contents and their locations. "Everything looks good here," he said after a cursory glance. "I'm going to get some air." As he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The son who had returned to me wasn't just distant or troubled. He was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. After finishing our gear check, I told Alan I needed to grab some extra fishing line from my storage shed in the backyard. It was a half-truth. I did keep spare supplies there, but my main goal was to observe Alan when he thought no one was watching. "I'll be right back," I said casually. "Just need to grab a few things from the shed." Alan nodded distractedly, already pulling out his phone to check it for the dozenth time that hour. Instead of heading directly to the shed, I circled around through the side yard. Our house sits on a quarter-acre lot with good sightlines between windows. From the kitchen window, I had a clear view into the garage where Alan remained with the fishing gear. At first, he just stood there, shifting his weight from foot to foot, glancing repeatedly at the door I had exited through. Then, apparently deciding the coast was clear, he moved quickly to the tackle box. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in multiple layers of plastic. It was about the size of a deck of cards, tightly sealed with duct tape around the edges. With practiced movements that sent a chill through me, Alan opened the bottom compartment of the tackle box, the one where I kept spare sinkers and larger lures, and carefully nestled the package beneath some equipment. He arranged everything to look untouched, then closed the compartment and stepped back, running a hand through his hair with a look of relief. I ducked away from the window before he could spot me, my mind racing. What had my son just hidden in my fishing gear, given the bruises on his arm and his erratic behavior? I had a sickening suspicion, but I needed to be sure before taking any action. I spent a few minutes in the shed actually gathering the fishing line I'd mentioned, giving myself time to think. The situation was painfully clear. Alan wasn't here for a heartwarming father-son reunion. He wasn't here because he missed me or wanted to repair our relationship. He was using me, planning to use my fishing trip as cover for transporting what I strongly suspected was drugs. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own son was setting me up as an unwitting drug mule. If we were stopped by rangers or police while at the lake, it would be my tackle box, my vehicle. I would be the one facing charges, potentially prison time. When I returned to the garage, I acted as if nothing had changed. Alan was leaning against the workbench, scrolling through his phone. "Found the line," I said, holding up the spool. "We should be all set for tomorrow." "Great," Alan replied, not really looking at me. "Hey, do we have any of that special bait, the salmon eggs in the little jars?" Another strange question from someone who had shown zero interest in fishing for years. The salmon eggs were kept in the same compartment where he'd hidden the package. "I think we're out." I lied. "Would you mind running to Wilson's Sporting Goods and picking some up? They close at 9, so you've got about an hour." Alan frowned, clearly reluctant to leave. "Can't we just use whatever bait we have? The trout at Baker really go for those salmon eggs," I insisted. "It would be a shame to go all that way and not have the right bait." After a moment of hesitation, Alan nodded. "Yeah, okay, I'll go grab some." "Take my card," I offered, pulling out my wallet. "Get a couple jars and maybe some of those plastic worms too, if they have them." Alan took the card with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be back in 30 minutes or so." As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went straight to the tackle box. With shaking hands, I opened the bottom compartment and found the package exactly where I had seen him place it. I carefully removed it, feeling the solid weight in my palm. For a moment, I just stared at it. This small package represented everything that had gone wrong between me and my son. It was physical proof of the distance between us, of the desperate place Alan had reached in his life. I unwrapped the outer layer of plastic, then another and another. Inside was a sandwich bag containing a substantial amount of white powder. My worst fears confirmed. This was almost certainly some kind of drug. Cocaine, heroin, or fentanyl. I couldn't tell the difference, and it didn't really matter. What mattered was that my son was using me to transport illegal drugs, putting me at risk legally, while also using the trip as an opportunity to potentially move product for whoever had him in their grip. The anger came first, hot and sudden, making my hands shake even more. How could he do this to me, after everything I had sacrificed, everything I had tried to do for him? Then came the crushing sadness, the realization that my son's addiction had driven him to betray his own father. I carefully rewrapped the package, my mind racing through options. I could confront Alan when he returned, demand explanations, perhaps even threaten to call the police. I could simply cancel the fishing trip, claiming illness or a work emergency. I could dispose of the drugs myself, flushing them down the toilet and pretending I knew nothing. None of these solutions felt right. If I confronted Alan directly, he would likely flee, returning to whatever dangerous situation had driven him to this desperate act. If I simply disposed of the drugs, he might face violent consequences from whoever had provided them. If I canceled the trip, I would only be postponing the inevitable. Alan would try again, perhaps in a way I couldn't detect next time. As I sat there holding the package that represented my son's downfall, memories of the little boy he had once been flooded my mind. Alan at 7, proudly showing me a fish he'd caught. Alan at 10, falling asleep against my shoulder during a long drive home from a camping trip. Alan at 12, crying in my arms after his mother's funeral, promising he would always be good for me. What would Sarah want me to do? The question came unbidden, as it often did in moments of difficulty. My wife had always been the wiser parent, the one who seemed to instinctively know the right approach to take with our son. The answer came with sudden clarity. Sarah would want me to help Alan, but not by shielding him from consequences, not by enabling his addiction or participating in his self-destruction even unwittingly. My decision made, I carefully returned the package to the exact position where Alan had placed it. Then I went inside to wait for his return, already planning my next move. Alan returned from the store with 2 jars of salmon eggs and a package of plastic worms, just as I had requested. He handed me back my credit card and the receipt, his eyes immediately darting toward the garage. "Got everything you asked for," he said. "The guy at the counter said the fluorescent worms are working well at Baker Lake right now." "That's great," I replied, pocketing the card. "We should be all set for tomorrow then." Alan shifted his weight, looking anxious. So the tackle box is all good. Everything ready to go. Yep, all packed and ready. I kept my voice casual, betraying none of the turmoil I felt inside. Say, would you mind bringing it in from the garage? My back's been acting up a bit today. A flash of concern crossed Alan's face. Your back? Is it bad? Will that affect our trip tomorrow? The worry in his voice wasn't for my well-being, I realized with a pang. It was fear that our fishing trip might be canceled. No, I assured him. Just a twinge, nothing serious. Relief replaced the concern. Good, I was really looking forward to tomorrow. Alan went to the garage and returned with the tackle box, setting it by the front door. I noticed how his eyes lingered on it, how his posture relaxed slightly once it was in sight. Whatever was in that package, it was clearly very important to him, or more likely to whoever had sent him here. We spent the rest of the evening in strained conversation. I suggested watching a baseball game, and Alan agreed without enthusiasm. During commercial breaks, I mentioned potential changes to our fishing plans. I was thinking, I said casually during the seventh-inning stretch, maybe we should head to the south side of the lake instead. I heard the fishing's better there this time of year. The change of plans visibly unsettled Alan. But you said North Shore. We already decided. Just a thought, I said, backing off. We can stick with the original plan. Around 10 o'clock, I let out an exaggerated groan while standing up from the couch. Dad? You okay? Alan asked, and for a moment I heard genuine concern. My back, I said, rubbing my lower spine. It's worse than I thought. Must have tweaked it in the garden yesterday. You should take something for it, Alan suggested. Advil or something stronger. Yeah, I will. I paused, then added reluctantly, if it's not better by morning, we might have to postpone the fishing trip. The effect was immediate. Alan sat bolt upright, his face a mask of panic. Postpone? No, we can't. I mean, I've got plans later this weekend. It has to be tomorrow. Well, let's see how I feel in the morning, I said. No sense making a decision now. Alan didn't sleep well that night. From my bedroom, I could hear him pacing in his old room, the floorboards creaking under his restless movements. Several times I heard him on the phone, his voice a tense whisper I couldn't quite make out. By morning, I had made my decision. I entered the kitchen with an exaggerated limp, wincing as I reached for the coffee pot. Morning, I said to Alan, who was already dressed and ready, sitting at the table with untouched toast in front of him. How's your back? He asked immediately. I sighed heavily. Not good. I can barely bend over. I don't think fishing is in the cards today, son. I'm sorry. The color drained from Alan's face, but we have to go. I was really looking forward to it. We can go next weekend, I offered, or whenever you're free. No, it has to be today. Alan's voice rose, an edge of desperation creeping in. Maybe I could drive and you could just sit in the boat. You wouldn't have to do much. I don't think so, I said firmly. Even the drive would be too much. I should probably just rest today. Alan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is just like you, Dad, always letting me down, always making promises you don't keep. The accusation stung, especially given the real reason for his anger. That's not fair, Alan. I can't help that my back is acting up. You never could help anything, could you? He snapped. Not when Mom got sick, not when I needed you during high school, not now. You're useless. His words cut deep, touching on insecurities I had carried since Sarah's death. Had I failed him as a father? Had I not been enough when he needed me most? But this time, I recognized his tactics for what they were. Manipulation born of desperation. He was trying to make me feel guilty enough to change my mind to go through with a trip that would put me at legal risk while enabling his addiction. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said calmly. But we're not going fishing today. Alan paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. Fine, then I'll take the gear and go myself. The rods are yours to use, I said, but the tackle box stays here. That's mine. What? That's ridiculous. I need proper gear to fish. You can borrow some hooks and weights, but the box stays. The argument escalated, with Alan becoming increasingly agitated. He accused me of never trusting him, of always treating him like a child, of deliberately sabotaging his plans. I remained calm, refusing to engage with his attempts to provoke me. Finally, Alan stormed off to the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. The moment he was out of sight, I moved quickly. I had been waiting for this opportunity. I grabbed my keys and slipped out the front door to where Alan's Honda was parked in the driveway. Thankfully, he had left it unlocked. Opening the driver's side door, I reached under the seat and carefully placed the package I had removed from my tackle box during the night. I positioned it far enough under the seat that it wouldn't be immediately visible, but would still be found in any thorough search. Back in the house before Alan emerged from the bathroom, I settled on the couch as if I hadn't moved. When he returned, his eyes were red and his hands were shaking more noticeably. "Look," he said, his voice tightly controlled, "I really need to use that tackle box, Dad. It's important to me, for sentimental reasons. It reminds me of our trips when I was a kid." The emotional manipulation was so transparent, it would have been laughable if the situation weren't so tragic. "I understand," I said gently, "but it stays here. You're welcome to look through it before you go if you want to reminisce." Alan's face hardened. "Fine, if that's how you want to be." He stomped to the front door where the tackle box still sat. For a moment he just stared at it, then abruptly knelt down and opened it. I watched as he methodically checked each compartment, his movements becoming increasingly frantic when he reached the bottom section. He dug through the contents, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "Looking for something specific?" I asked innocently. Alan's head snapped up, his eyes wild. "No, just checking what lures you have." He closed the box with trembling hands, his face ashen. Whatever consequences he faced for losing that package, they were clearly severe enough to terrify him. "I need to go," he said abruptly, standing up. "What about fishing?" I asked. "Not in the mood anymore." He grabbed his jacket and keys. "I'll call you later." I followed him to the door. "Alan, wait. Whatever's going on with you, I want to help. Please talk to me, son." For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes, perhaps recognition of the genuine concern in my voice. But then the wall came back up. "There's nothing going on," he said flatly, "and I don't need your help." He strode to his car without looking back. I stood in the doorway, watching as he threw his jacket into the passenger seat and started the engine. The car backed out of the driveway with a screech of tires, Alan's face a mask of panic and rage as he sped away. I closed the door slowly, a heavy weight settling in my chest. What I had done felt both necessary and terrible. I had made a choice that might save my son's life, but might also destroy whatever relationship we had left. All I could do now was wait and hope that I had made the right decision. For exactly 32 minutes after Alan left, I sat in my living room staring at the phone in my hands. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but I knew something would happen. When you've been a parent, as long as I have, you develop a sixth sense about these things. The call, when it came, was from a number I didn't recognize. With a deep breath, I answered. "Hello, is this Gregory Jensen?" a formal male voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "Mr. Jensen, this is Officer Ramirez with the King County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling regarding your son, Alan Jensen." Despite expecting something like this, my heart still dropped. "Is he all right? Has there been an accident?" "Your son is physically fine, sir," Officer Ramirez said, "but he has been detained following a traffic stop. He was pulled over for a broken taillight, and during the stop, our K-9 unit alerted to the presence of narcotics in his vehicle." I closed my eyes, the confirmation of what I already knew, bringing no satisfaction. "What did you find?" "A substantial quantity of what appears to be heroin, sir. It was concealed under the driver's seat. Your son is currently in custody at the South Precinct Station." Even though I had placed the package there myself, hearing it described as a substantial quantity of heroin made my blood run cold. Not cocaine or some other party drug, but heroin, one of the most destructive substances out there. The bruises on Alan's arm took on an even more sinister meaning. "I see," I managed to say, my mouth dry. "Sir, the reason I'm calling is that your son has made some claims that we need to address. He's stating that the drugs belong to you and that he had no knowledge they were in the vehicle." Despite being prepared for this possibility, the betrayal still stung sharply. My own son was trying to pin his crime on me, his father who had only ever tried to protect and support him. That's not true," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We'd like you to come down to the station to make a statement, Mr. Jensen, as soon as possible, please." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, I promised. After hanging up, I sat motionless for several long moments. The weight of what was happening, of what I had set in motion, pressed down on me. Had I gone too far? Was there another way I could have handled this? But the alternative, allowing Alan to continue down this self-destructive path, possibly dragging me into his criminal activities, seemed even worse. The drive to the police station was a blur. I parked in the visitor's lot, noting Alan's Honda in the secured area to the side, a police cruiser parked behind it. Inside, I gave my name to the desk sergeant and was led to a small interview room where Officer Ramirez was waiting. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with a professional demeanor that betrayed little emotion. "Mr. Jensen, thank you for coming in so quickly. I understand this must be difficult for you." "Where's my son?" I asked. "Can I see him?" "He's in a holding cell at the moment. Before you see him, we need to clarify some things. Please have a seat." I sat across from Officer Ramirez, hands folded on the table to hide their trembling. "Your son claims that the heroin found in his vehicle belongs to you," Ramirez began. "He states that you placed it under the driver's seat without his knowledge while he was visiting your home today." I took a deep breath. "Officer, I need to tell you exactly what happened from the beginning." Over the next 20 minutes, I explained everything. Alan's unexpected visit, his request to go fishing, how I had observed him hiding something in my tackle box, and my discovery that it was drugs. I admitted to moving the package to Alan's car, explaining my reasoning as clearly as I could. "I know it wasn't the right way to handle it," I concluded. "I should have called you immediately when I found the drugs, but I was afraid of what would happen to him, afraid he would disappear again before getting the help he needs." Officer Ramirez had taken notes throughout my statement. "Mr. Jensen, placing narcotics in someone else's vehicle, even your son's, is itself a crime." "I understand," I said quietly. "I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come from my actions." Ramirez studied me for a moment. "We'll need to verify your account. Do you have any security cameras at your home that might have captured your son placing the drugs in your tackle box?" I shook my head. "No, but my neighbor across the street has cameras. They might have recorded Alan arriving and leaving at least." "That would be helpful. We'll follow up on that." Ramirez closed his notebook. "For now, we'll continue processing your son. The amount of heroin in his possession indicates intent to distribute, not just personal use." The words hit me like a physical blow. Intent to distribute carried much heavier penalties than simple possession. What kind of sentence could he be looking at? That would be up to the prosecutor and the judge, but given the quantity, and if he has no prior felony convictions, potentially 3 to 5 years. 5 years. My son could be in prison for 5 years. The reality of what I had set in motion crashed down on me, but even as I felt the crushing weight of guilt, another part of me recognized the truth. Alan needed intervention, and this might be the only way to get it. "Can I see him now?" I asked. Officer Ramirez nodded and led me to a small room with a glass partition. On the other side sat Alan, still in the clothes he'd worn at my house, but now with handcuffs securing his wrists to a table. He looked small and frightened, nothing like the angry young man who had stormed out of my house hours earlier. When he saw me, his expression transformed into pure hatred. "You!" he spat, lunging forward until the handcuffs brought him up short. "You set me up, your own son." I sat down across from him, the glass between us, suddenly seeming like an apt metaphor for the barriers that had grown between us over the years. "I didn't set you up, Alan," I said quietly. "You tried to use me as a drug mule. You put illegal drugs in my fishing gear, planning to make me an unwitting accomplice in your crime." "You don't understand anything." Alan's voice cracked with emotion. "They were going to kill me if I didn't make the delivery. I owe them money, and they said this was the only way to clear the debt." The confirmation of my worst fears did nothing to ease the pain. "Why didn't you come to me for help? Why try to involve me in drug trafficking instead of just asking for money to pay your debt?" Alan laughed bitterly. "Money, Dad. I owe them $20,000. Were you going to write a check for that? And even if you did, they wouldn't let me go. Once you're in, you're in. The only way out is to work it off or die." $20,000. The figure staggered me. How had things gotten so far out of control without my knowledge? How had my son fallen so deeply into this world while I remained oblivious? "We could have figured something out," I insisted. "Together, without breaking the law." "Like you did," Alan shot back. "You planted drugs in my car. How is that not breaking the law?" He had a point, one that had been gnawing at me since I made the decision. "I did what I thought was necessary to save you from yourself. I'm not proud of how I did it, but I couldn't let you continue down this path." "Save me." Alan's voice rose. "You've ruined my life. Do you have any idea what will happen to me in prison? What they'll do to me when they find out I got caught with their product?" The fear in his eyes was real, and it shook me to my core. What had I done? Had I sent my son into an even more dangerous situation? Listen to me, I said urgently, leaning closer to the glass. Tell the police everything. Names, locations, how the operation works. They can protect you if you cooperate. Alan shook his head violently. You don't get it. Nobody can protect me from these people. Nobody. We were interrupted by a knock on the door. Officer Ramirez entered holding a tablet. Mr. Jensen, we've obtained footage from your neighbor's security camera. It clearly shows Alan arriving at your home and later leaving in a highly agitated state. We've also spoken with the neighbor who confirmed seeing your son arrive yesterday. He turned to Alan. We have probable cause to obtain a search warrant for your apartment, Mr. Jensen. Is there anything you'd like to tell us now that might help your case? Alan's shoulders slumped in defeat. The facade finally crumbling, he began to cry, deep, racking sobs that reminded me painfully of when he was a little boy. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he whispered through tears. I just needed money for a fix, and it spiraled from there. As Alan began to talk, sharing details of his addiction and the debt that had led him to attempt using me as an unwitting drug courier, I sat silently, my heart breaking for the son I had failed to protect from this destructive path. But beneath the heartbreak was a small, fragile hope that perhaps this rock-bottom moment might finally be the beginning of his recovery. The next several hours passed in a blur of police interviews, statements, and paperwork. Alan eventually provided a full confession, admitting that he had been using heroin for over 3 years and had accumulated significant debt to his supplier. He confirmed my account of how he had hidden the drugs in my tackle box, intending to use our fishing trip as cover for transport to a buyer in the Baker Lake area. When questioned about my actions, Alan reluctantly admitted that I had no prior knowledge of his plan and that I had never been involved in his drug activities. The security footage from my neighbor's house corroborated the timeline I had described, showing Alan arriving and later leaving in a clearly agitated state. Based on the evidence and statements we've gathered, Officer Ramirez told me in a private conversation, we won't be pursuing charges against you for moving the narcotics to your son's vehicle. While technically illegal, it's clear you were acting out of parental concern rather than criminal intent. Relief washed over me quickly, followed by guilt that I was escaping consequences while my son faced years in prison. What happens to Alan now? I asked. He'll be formally charged with possession with intent to distribute. Given the quantity of heroin, he's facing serious time. However, Ramirez added. Seeing my expression, his cooperation may help his case. He's provided some valuable information about his supplier, which our narcotics division is very interested in. I nodded, trying to process everything. Can I help him in any way? Post-bail? Bail hasn't been set yet. He'll appear before a judge tomorrow morning. Given the severity of the charges and the information he's provided about these dealers, the judge might consider him both a flight risk and potentially in danger. But you can certainly attend the hearing. As I prepared to leave the station, I requested one more brief visit with Alan. He was still handcuffed in the interview room, looking exhausted and defeated. I never meant for this to happen, I told him through the glass. I just wanted to stop you from going down this road any further. Alan looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. You think I wanted this life? You think I planned to become an addict who would betray his own father? No, I said softly. I don't think anyone plans that, but we are where we are now, and we need to deal with it. Alan gave a bitter laugh. There's no we here, Dad. I'm the one going to prison. You're not alone in this, I insisted. I'm going to get you a good lawyer, someone who specializes in drug cases, and I'll support you however I can. Why would you help me after what I tried to do to you? The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of years of distrust and distance. I thought carefully before answering. Because you're my son, because I love you, and because I believe that somewhere inside you is still the boy who used to go fishing with me at Baker Lake, who used to tell me he wanted to be just like me when he grew up. Alan's eyes filled with tears again. That kid is long gone, Dad. I don't believe that, I said firmly. He's still there, buried under addiction and bad choices, and I'm going to help you find him again. For a moment, something flickered in Alan's eyes, a spark of the connection we once had, perhaps even a glimmer of hope. But then the walls came back up. It's too late for that, he said flatly. Just go home, Dad. There's nothing you can do now. Despite his dismissal, I refused to give up. The next morning, I contacted Thomas Lawson, an attorney who specialized in drug cases and had a reputation for helping clients get into treatment programs rather than simply serving time. He agreed to take Alan's case, though he was frank about the challenges ahead. With the quantity involved, some prison time is almost inevitable, he told me during our consultation. But given that this is his first offense of this magnitude, and considering his cooperation, we might be able to negotiate a plea deal that includes mandatory treatment. True to my word, I attended every court hearing over the following weeks. Alan initially refused to see me, sending word through his attorney that he didn't want any visitors. It hurt, but I understood. Shame is a powerful emotion, and facing the parent you've betrayed isn't easy. The prosecutor eventually offered a plea deal: 2 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with mandatory participation in an intensive drug rehabilitation program. It was less than the 5 years he potentially faced, largely due to his cooperation with the ongoing investigation into his suppliers. On the day Alan accepted the plea deal, he finally agreed to see me. We sat across from each other in the visitation room of the county jail. The physical distance between us, nothing compared to the emotional gulf that had developed over years. "The lawyer you got me," Alan began awkwardly. "He's good. Thanks for that." "Of course," I replied. "I meant what I said about supporting you through this." Alan studied the table between us. "Why are you doing all this after what I tried to do?" It was the same question he'd asked before, but this time there seemed to be genuine curiosity rather than bitterness behind it. "Because I failed you," I said simply. "I saw the signs of your addiction for years and didn't do enough. I thought giving you space, giving you money when you asked was helping. But it wasn't. It was enabling. And now we both have a chance to do better." Alan looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "You think you failed me, Dad? I'm the one who made these choices. I'm the one who started using. I'm the one who tried to set you up as a drug mule." "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "But now we have a choice about what happens next. I choose to be here for you, not to enable your addiction, but to support your recovery." For the first time in years, I saw a genuine smile touch my son's lips. "I don't deserve a second chance." "Everyone deserves a second chance," I said. "Some people even need a third or fourth. The important thing is what you do with it." Before Alan was transferred to the state prison to begin serving his sentence, I made sure he had everything he needed: appropriate clothing, permitted personal items, funds in his commissary account. I researched the facility where he'd be housed, learning about their rehabilitation programs and how I could maintain regular contact. The day they took him away was one of the hardest of my life, second only to burying Sarah. Watching my son being led away in handcuffs, knowing he would spend the next 2 years in a cell, broke something inside me. But I reminded myself that the alternative, allowing him to continue spiraling deeper into addiction and crime, would have eventually led to something far worse. During his first month in prison, Alan didn't call or write. I sent letters every week sharing mundane details about my life, memories of happier times, and assurances of my continued support. I never knew if he read them. Then, 6 weeks after his incarceration began, I received a collect call from the prison. Alan's voice was hesitant at first, but as we talked, the walls began to come down. He had started participating in the prison's drug counseling program and was beginning to confront the roots of his addiction. "The counselor says I used drugs to escape here," he told me. "At first from the pain of losing Mom, then from the pressure of school, then from the disappointment of dropping out. It was always escape." "That makes sense," I said, careful not to sound judgmental. "Grief can take many forms." "I blamed you for a lot," Alan admitted. "For not saving Mom, for being too strict sometimes and too lenient other times, for not understanding what I was going through. But the truth is, I didn't understand it myself." That first call lasted only 10 minutes, but marked the beginning of a healing process for both of us. We established a routine. He would call every Sunday afternoon and I would visit once a month. During those visits, we slowly rebuilt our relationship, one honest conversation at a time. 6 months into his sentence, Alan was accepted into an intensive therapy program that focused specifically on addiction recovery. The program was demanding, requiring participants to confront painful truths about themselves and their choices. There were weeks when our calls were emotionally raw, Alan struggling with the demons he was finally facing. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," he confessed during a particularly difficult period. It hurts too much looking at all the ways I've screwed up all the people I've hurt. The fact that it hurts means you're healing, I told him. Like cleaning out an infected wound. It has to hurt before it can get better. As Alan progressed through his recovery, I also sought help. I joined a support group for parents of addicted children, learning that many of my experiences were common, and that my feelings of guilt, anger, and helplessness were shared by others. Through the group, I gained tools for supporting Alan's recovery without enabling his addiction, for setting boundaries while maintaining connection. By the time Alan had served 1 year of his sentence, the change in him was remarkable. The physical signs of addiction had faded. He had gained healthy weight, his complexion had cleared, his eyes were bright and focused. More importantly, his attitude had transformed. He spoke with clarity about his addiction, taking responsibility for his actions without drowning in shame. "I keep thinking about that day," he told me during one visit, "when you moved the drugs to my car. At the time, I hated you for it, but now, I think it might have saved my life." "How so?" I asked. "If I had made that delivery, there would have been another, and another. I was already in so deep with these people. Eventually, I would have overdosed or been killed in some drug deal gone bad. Or worse, I might have gotten you involved in something that got you hurt." He shook his head. "What you did was the only thing that could have broken that cycle." His words lifted a weight I had carried since that fateful day. The guilt over my actions, the fear that I had made the wrong choice, they began to dissolve in the light of Alan's newfound clarity. During his second year, Alan completed his GED and began taking college courses through a prison education program. He discovered an aptitude for computer programming and devoted himself to learning coding skills that could translate into employment after his release. When the day of Alan's release finally arrived, I waited nervously outside the prison gates. Would the changes I had witnessed during visits and calls hold up in the real world? Would the temptations of freedom prove too strong for his recovery? The man who walked through those gates was not the boy who had left my house in a panic 2 years earlier. Nor was he the angry young man who had blamed me for his problems. This Alan stood straight, made eye contact, and embraced me without reservation. "Let's go home, Dad," he said simply. The journey wasn't over, of course. Alan faced significant challenges reintegrating into society with a felony conviction. He moved back into my house temporarily, following the strict conditions of his probation: regular drug testing, counseling sessions, curfews. He found work at a tech startup founded by a former inmate who specifically hired people with criminal records, giving them a second chance. There were difficult days, moments of temptation, periods of depression, instances where old patterns of thought threatened to resurface. But Alan had developed resilience and coping strategies, and more importantly, he had learned to reach out for help when he needed it. 1 year after his release, we finally took that fishing trip to Baker Lake. As we sat in the boat lines cast into the still water, the silence between us was comfortable rather than strained. "You know what I've learned through all this?" Alan said, watching his line bob gently on the surface. "What's that? Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that save us. When you moved those drugs to my car, you weren't just protecting yourself. You were forcing me to face consequences I'd been avoiding for years. It was the toughest kind of love." I thought about that day, about the fear and doubt I had felt, about the way my heart had broken watching him being arrested. "I was terrified I was doing the wrong thing," I admitted. "It was the right thing," Alan said firmly, "the only thing that could have broken through to me." He paused, then added, "I still have a long road ahead, but at least now I'm on the right path." As the sun began to set over the lake, casting golden light across the water, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before Sarah's death. The journey with Alan had been painful beyond words, full of mistakes and missteps on both our parts. But here we were, father and son, fishing together again. Not the same as before. Both of us carried scars from the years between, but perhaps stronger for having weathered the storm. Looking at my son's face, calm and determined in the fading light, I understood a truth about parenting that had eluded me for years. Sometimes the most loving action isn't shielding your child from consequences, but allowing them to face the reality of their choices. Sometimes true love means letting go of your need to protect in order to give them the opportunity to save themselves. Has a loved one ever made a difficult decision that ultimately helped you even when you resented it at the time? Or have you had to make a tough choice to help someone you care about? Share your experience in the comments below, And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support helps me continue sharing these real-life lessons, and remember, sometimes the hardest choices we make are the ones that matter most. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength for your own difficult decisions.